Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment when the noise of the world quiets down just enough for you to hear the truth tapping on your heart, not shouting, not begging, just reminding you of who you were created to be. Tonight is about that moment because 2026 is not waiting on luck, connections, or perfect timing. It's waiting on you. Too many people want the promise without the process, the harvest without the discipline, the victory without the faith. But success doesn't knock on random doors. It responds to commitment. It follows preparation. It shows up when belief and action walk together. You see, you don't stumble into a great future. You build one decision at a time. Some of you walked in here carrying doubt disguised as realism. Others are still haunted by what didn't work before. But hear this clearly, your past may explain you, but it does not define you. What defines you is what you do next. And what you do next must be rooted in faith. Faith that God did not bring you this far to leave you stuck, small or silent. 2026 is not a calendar change, it's a calling. A calling to rise earlier, think higher, forgive faster, and work harder than you ever have before. A calling to stop negotiating with fear and start agreeing with purpose. Because when preparation meets opportunity, the world calls it success, but we know it as obedience meeting belief. You are not here by accident. You are not underqualified. You are not late. There is something placed inside you that the world needs, and it's time to stop sitting on it. Walk boldly, speak confidently, move faithfully. If you trust God enough to plant the seed and you're brave enough to do the work, 2026 won't just be your year, it will be your proof. Purpose over pressure means choosing intention instead of reaction, direction instead of distraction, and conviction instead of convenience. Pressure is loud. It demands immediate responses, emotional decisions, and quick validation. Purpose, on the other hand, is quiet but firm. It doesn't rush you, it roots you. When you live by pressure, you allow deadlines, opinions, comparisons, and expectations to dictate your moves. When you live by purpose, you move with clarity even when the world is chaotic, because you know why you are moving in the first place. Pressure comes from outside, but purpose is born within. Pressure asks, what do they want from me right now? Purpose asks, what was I created to do, regardless of the moment? Many people feel exhausted, not because they are doing too much, but because they are doing too many things that have nothing to do with their calling. They are busy, but not fulfilled. Active, but not aligned. Purpose filters your yes and gives you the courage to say no without guilt. When pressure is driving your life, urgency replaces wisdom. You rush into relationships you weren't prepared for, accept opportunities you didn't pray about, and chase success that doesn't fit who you are becoming. Purpose slows you down just enough to ask the right questions. Is this assignment aligned with my values? Is this decision feeding my future or just calming my anxiety? Purpose doesn't eliminate challenges, but it gives them meaning. Living with purpose requires faith, because purpose often asks you to delay gratification while pressure demands instant results. Pressure wants applause now. Purpose is willing to wait for impact later. Pressure thrives on comparison, constantly measuring your progress against someone else's timeline. Purpose understands that divine timing cannot be rushed and that your journey does not lose value because it looks different. What God has designed for you will require patience, obedience, and trust, not panic. Pressure can make you abandon the very process that is shaping you. It convinces you that slow progress is failure and that silence means nothing is happening. Purpose reminds you that roots grow in hidden places before fruit ever appears. Some seasons are not for visibility, but for development. Purpose keeps you grounded when results are delayed, because you understand that preparation is still progress. When you lead with purpose, you stop allowing fear to make your decisions. Pressure magnifies fear, fear of missing out, fear of falling behind, fear of disappointing others. Purpose confronts fear with truth. It says you were never meant to live on approval or survive on validation. You were meant to walk in assignment. Purpose gives you the strength to stand still when everyone else is rushing and to move boldly when others hesitate. Choosing purpose over pressure also means accepting responsibility for your growth. Pressure likes excuses. It blames circumstances, people, and timing. Purpose takes ownership. It understands that discipline is not punishment, it is alignment. You don't wake up motivated every day, but purpose keeps you committed even when emotions fluctuate. It trains you to act based on calling, not comfort. When purpose leads, pressure loses its power to control you. Challenges no longer feel like threats, but confirmations that you are stretching beyond who you used to be. Opposition becomes part of the refinement, not a sign to retreat. Purpose anchors you when uncertainty tries to shake your confidence, because you know that your identity is not tied to outcomes, but to obedience. Purpose over pressure is the daily decision to live intentionally, to listen more than react, to trust God's direction, even when the path is unclear, and to move forward with confidence rooted in calling rather than circumstances. Faith-fueled discipline is the ability to remain committed long after excitement fades, driven not by emotion but by belief. It is easy to start when motivation is high and the vision feels close. It is much harder to continue when progress is slow, results are invisible, and no one is applauding. Faith is what convinces you that the work still matters, even when there is no immediate reward, and discipline is the structure that turns that belief into daily action. Discipline without faith becomes mechanical and draining. You go through routines, but your heart is disconnected from the reason. Faith without discipline becomes emotional and inconsistent. You believe deeply, but you don't move consistently. Faith-fueled discipline is the balance between the two, where belief supplies endurance and discipline supplies direction. It is waking up and doing what needs to be done because you trust that obedience compounds over time. This kind of discipline is not about perfection. It is about persistence. It is showing up on the days when you feel inadequate, uncertain, or tired. It is choosing integrity when shortcuts are available and consistency when quitting would be easier. Faith-fueled discipline understands that growth is rarely dramatic. It is subtle, layered, and often uncomfortable. The discipline to stay in the process comes from trusting that God is working even when you cannot measure the results. Faith changes how you view resistance. Instead of seeing obstacles as signs to stop, you begin to recognize them as evidence that what you are pursuing has weight and value. Discipline keeps you grounded when resistance appears. It reminds you that discomfort is not danger, and that struggle does not mean you are off course. Faith reframes the challenge, and discipline keeps you moving through it. Many people break under pressure because their discipline is powered by fear or external validation. They work to prove something, to keep up, or to avoid disappointment. When fear runs out of energy, discipline collapses. Faith-fueled discipline is sustained by trust rather than anxiety. You are not striving to earn approval. You are stewarding an assignment. That perspective removes desperation and replaces it with steadiness. Faith-fueled discipline also teaches patience. Faith understands that timing matters, and discipline respects the process required to mature. You stop demanding immediate success and start honoring daily obedience. Small habits become sacred acts because they are expressions of trust. Each disciplined choice becomes a declaration that you believe the future God promised is worth preparing for today. This discipline shapes character before it produces results. It trains you to be reliable, focused, and resilient. It builds the inner strength required to handle success without losing humility and failure without losing hope. Faith keeps your heart aligned, and discipline keeps your actions aligned. Together, they create stability in seasons of uncertainty. Faith-fueled discipline does not rely on constant clarity. Sometimes you move forward without full understanding, guided by conviction rather than certainty. You continue because stopping would mean surrendering to doubt. Discipline becomes an act of worship, a way of saying you trust God enough to obey even when the outcome is unclear. This kind of discipline also protects you from burnout. When faith leads, you are not carrying the weight alone. You learn to rest without guilt, to reset without quitting, and to pace yourself without losing momentum. Discipline becomes sustainable because it is rooted in purpose, not pressure. Faith-fueled discipline keeps you anchored when progress is slow, when setbacks occur, and when the vision feels distant. It reminds you that consistency is powerful, obedience is transformative, and the work you do in private is shaping the results that will eventually appear in public. Ownership of choices begins with the understanding that responsibility is not a burden, but a form of freedom. The moment you accept that your decisions shape your direction, you reclaim your power. Too often, people surrender control of their lives by blaming circumstances, upbringing, timing, or other people. While those factors may influence you, they do not define the outcome unless you allow them to. Ownership means recognizing that every choice, whether intentional or passive, carries consequences. Many people avoid ownership because it removes the comfort of excuses. Excuses provide temporary relief, but long-term stagnation. When you blame external factors, you may protect your ego, but you also limit your growth. Ownership requires humility, the willingness to say, I chose this, and the courage to say, I can choose differently. That awareness shifts you from being a victim of life to a steward of your future. Every day presents choices, both obvious and subtle. Some are loud and dramatic, while others are quiet habits that shape your direction over time. Ownership is not just about major decisions. It is about the daily disciplines, the conversations you avoid or confront, the standards you maintain when no one is watching. What you tolerate today becomes the structure of your tomorrow. When you take ownership, you stop waiting for motivation and start acting with intention. Ownership also demands honesty. It asks you to evaluate your patterns without defensiveness. Are your results reflecting your effort, your focus, and your consistency? Are you blaming delays on others while ignoring your own hesitation? Honest ownership does not condemn, it clarifies. It exposes where adjustments are needed and where growth is possible. Without that clarity, progress remains accidental instead of deliberate. Taking ownership does not mean carrying guilt for past mistakes. Guilt keeps you stuck in regret, while ownership moves you forward with wisdom. You acknowledge what went wrong, extract the lesson, and make a new choice. Faith plays a critical role here because ownership rooted in faith believes that failure is not final and that redemption is always available. You are not defined by your worst decision, but by your willingness to choose better going forward. Ownership also reshapes how you respond to adversity. Instead of asking why something happened to you, you begin to ask how you will respond to it. You cannot control every situation, but you can control your attitude, your effort, and your response. That shift changes obstacles into opportunities for maturity. Growth does not come from comfort, it comes from responsibility. When you own your choices, you stop outsourcing your confidence. You no longer depend on validation to feel worthy or permission to pursue what matters to you. You understand that waiting for perfect conditions is often a disguised form of fear. Ownership moves you into action, even when conditions are uncertain, because you trust that progress is built through responsibility, not readiness. Ownership also strengthens discipline. When you accept that your future is influenced by your daily decisions, you begin to respect your time, your energy, and your commitments. You become more selective about what you say yes to and more intentional about how you invest yourself. Discipline becomes a form of self-respect rather than restriction. Taking ownership creates alignment between belief and behavior. You stop saying you want growth while choosing comfort. You stop praying for change while resisting responsibility. Ownership bridges that gap by requiring action that matches intention. It is where faith meets accountability. Ownership of choices ultimately positions you to lead your life with clarity, maturity, and purpose. It replaces helplessness with responsibility, excuses with action, and stagnation with growth, allowing you to move forward with confidence grounded in deliberate, faith-driven decisions. Consistency beats talent because talent may open a door, but consistency determines how long you stay in the room. Talent is often celebrated because it is visible and impressive, but consistency is quiet, repetitive, and frequently overlooked. Yet it is consistency that builds mastery, earns trust, and produces lasting results. Many gifted people fall short, not because they lack ability, but because they lack the discipline to show up when enthusiasm fades. Talent can create momentum, but momentum without consistency quickly collapses. A strong start means little without sustained effort. Consistency is the commitment to continue regardless of mood, recognition, or immediate reward. It is choosing to do the work on ordinary days, not just on inspired ones. While talent may give you confidence early on, consistency gives you credibility over time. One of the greatest illusions is believing that talent alone will carry you. Talent can make things easier at first, but it can also make you complacent. When things come naturally, there is less urgency to practice, refine, and improve. Consistency forces you to engage in the process, to confront weaknesses, and to develop resilience. It creates growth that talent alone cannot sustain. Consistency is where character is formed. Showing up repeatedly builds discipline, patience, and focus. It trains you to honor commitments even when the results are delayed. Over time, small, consistent actions compound into significant outcomes. What seems insignificant today becomes transformative when repeated faithfully. This is why consistent effort often outperforms raw ability in the long run. Consistency also levels the playing field. Not everyone starts with the same gifts, resources, or opportunities, but consistency is available to everyone. It does not require perfection, just persistence. When you commit to consistent improvement, you narrow the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Faith reinforces this process by reminding you that growth is not rushed, but cultivated. Talent often attracts attention, but consistency earns trust. People may admire talent, but they rely on consistency. Reliability is built through repeated follow-through. When others know they can depend on you, opportunities increase. Consistency turns potential into performance and intention into results. It signals maturity and readiness for greater responsibility. Consistency also guards against emotional decision-making. Motivation fluctuates, but consistency creates stability. You do not rely on how you feel to determine what you do. You act based on commitment rather than convenience. This steadiness becomes especially important in challenging seasons when quitting feels justified. Consistency keeps you grounded when emotions would otherwise derail progress. Faith gives consistency meaning beyond visible results. You continue because you believe the effort matters, even when the outcome is uncertain. Faith anchors you during periods of repetition that feel unproductive. It reassures you that nothing done with intention is wasted. Consistency becomes an act of trust, a declaration that growth is happening even when it cannot be seen. Many people admire success, but underestimate the consistency behind it. Breakthroughs are often the result of long-term faithfulness, not sudden talent. What looks like overnight success is usually years of unnoticed discipline. Consistency sustains momentum when excitement fades and strengthens resilience when challenges arise. Consistency also refines talent. Repetition sharpens skill, improves judgment, and deepens understanding. It turns ability into excellence and effort into mastery. Without consistency, talent remains undeveloped potential. With consistency, even modest ability can produce extraordinary results. Choosing consistency means committing to progress over perfection. You accept that growth will be gradual and that setbacks are part of the process. You stay focused on the long-term vision rather than short-term validation. In doing so, consistency becomes the bridge between where you are and who you are becoming. Growth through adversity is forged in moments you would never choose but cannot avoid. Adversity disrupts comfort, exposes weaknesses, and challenges assumptions. While it often feels like an interruption, it is frequently an invitation to evolve. Comfort maintains who you are, but adversity reveals who you can become. It presses you beyond familiar limits and forces you to confront aspects of yourself that ease would never uncover. Adversity strips away illusions of control. It reminds you that strength is not about never being shaken, but about learning how to stand when everything feels unstable. In difficult seasons, you discover whether your confidence is rooted in circumstances or conviction. Faith becomes essential here because adversity rarely comes with explanations. It requires trust when clarity is absent and perseverance when outcomes are uncertain. Many people resist adversity because it feels like failure. In reality, adversity is often the classroom where wisdom is gained. Loss teaches value. Delay teaches patience. Disappointment teaches discernment. Each challenge carries a lesson that cannot be learned in comfort. When you lean into adversity instead of running from it, you allow growth to take place at a deeper level. Adversity develops resilience by forcing you to adapt. You learn how to respond rather than react, how to breathe through pressure instead of breaking under it. Resilience is not built in moments of ease, but in repeated encounters with difficulty. Each time you endure and continue, your capacity expands. You become stronger, not because the adversity disappears, but because you learn how to carry it differently. Adversity also refines perspective. What once felt urgent may lose importance, while what truly matters becomes clearer. Pain has a way of rearranging priorities. It teaches you to value character over convenience and purpose over popularity. In adversity, distractions fall away and focus sharpens. You begin to see what is worth fighting for and what is worth releasing. Faith transforms adversity from an obstacle into a tool. Instead of asking why the challenge exists, you begin to ask what it is shaping within you. Faith does not deny the pain, but it gives the pain context. It allows you to believe that even hardship has meaning and that nothing endured in trust is wasted. Adversity becomes part of the preparation, not a sign of abandonment. Adversity also exposes inner strength you did not know you possessed. When options are limited and support feels distant, you are forced to rely on courage, creativity, and conviction. You learn that you are more capable than you assumed. Each obstacle overcome reinforces self-trust and deepens confidence rooted in experience rather than assumption. Growth through adversity also produces empathy. Experiencing hardship softens judgment and expands compassion. You become more patient with others, because you understand struggle. This empathy strengthens leadership and relationships, allowing you to connect with people at a deeper level. Adversity teaches you how to lift others because you have learned how to rise yourself. Adversity challenges identity. It asks whether you define yourself by success or by resilience. When titles, plans, or expectations are disrupted, you are confronted with who you are beneath them. This confrontation can be uncomfortable, but it is necessary for growth. You learn that your worth is not diminished by difficulty, and that your value remains intact, even in struggle. Choosing growth in adversity requires intentionality. It means refusing to become bitter and choosing to become better. It means learning instead of resenting, trusting instead of retreating. Growth does not erase the pain, but it redeems it by transforming hardship into strength, wisdom, and endurance that carry you forward with depth and maturity. Preparation meets opportunity at the intersection of readiness and timing, where effort aligns with possibility. Many people wait for opportunity as if it arrives fully formed and independent of their actions. In reality, opportunity often passes unnoticed because preparation has been neglected. What looks like luck is usually the result of disciplined groundwork, done long before the moment appears. Preparation is an act of faith because it requires work without guarantees. You study, practice, train, and refine with no certainty that the door will open when you are ready. Yet preparation builds confidence that does not depend on circumstance. When opportunity arrives, doubt has less power because you know the work has already been done. You step forward, not hoping to survive the moment, but prepared to steward it. Opportunity rarely announces itself with clarity. It often comes disguised as responsibility, pressure, or challenge. Preparation sharpens discernment, enabling you to recognize moments that align with your purpose. Without preparation, opportunity can feel overwhelming or intimidating. With preparation, it feels familiar, like a test you have already rehearsed for. Preparation develops competence, but it also builds character. It teaches patience, humility, and persistence. Preparing in private shapes how you perform in public. The unseen hours of effort create stability under pressure. When opportunity comes, your response is not reactive, but intentional. You are not scrambling to catch up. You are stepping into what you have been preparing for all along. Many people desire opportunity, but resist preparation because preparation is uncomfortable. It requires sacrifice, delayed gratification, and consistency when results are not visible. Opportunity, however, demands readiness. When preparation is skipped, opportunity becomes a burden rather than a blessing. The weight of responsibility can crush unprepared confidence, while prepared confidence carries it with composure. Faith reframes preparation as obedience rather than ambition. You prepare not just to advance, but to be faithful with what you are entrusted. Preparation becomes a form of stewardship. You are honoring your gifts by developing them, not waiting for permission to take them seriously. Faith assures you that preparation is never wasted, even if the opportunity arrives later than expected. Preparation also reduces fear. Fear thrives in uncertainty and lack of readiness. When you are prepared, fear loses its grip because competence replaces insecurity. You may still feel nervous, but you are not paralyzed. Preparation does not eliminate risk, but it equips you to face it with clarity. You trust your process because you have invested in it. Opportunity is often time sensitive. It requires quick decisions and confident action. Preparation allows you to respond instead of hesitate. You are not debating your worthiness in the moment because preparation has already settled that question. You move with decisiveness because your foundation is secure. Preparation also teaches you to respect opportunity. When you understand the cost of readiness, You value the moment when it arrives. You do not take it lightly or waste it on distraction. Preparation cultivates gratitude and responsibility. You recognize that opportunity is not just about personal gain, but about impact and service. Preparation aligns effort with vision. It ensures that when opportunity opens the door, you are stepping into the right room, not just any room. Without preparation, opportunity can pull you off course. With preparation, opportunity becomes a confirmation of direction. You recognize it because it matches what you have been building toward. Preparation meeting opportunity is not about perfection, but about readiness. It is the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you did the work, trusted the process, and positioned yourself faithfully. When the moment arrives, you are not surprised by the opportunity, because in many ways, you have already been living in expectation of it. Courage to act despite fear is the willingness to move forward while fully aware of the risk, the uncertainty, and the possibility of failure. Fear is not the absence of ability or faith. It is a natural response to the unknown. What separates growth from stagnation is not who feels fear, but who refuses to let fear make the final decision. Courage does not silence fear. It speaks louder than it. Fear often disguises itself as logic. It sounds reasonable, cautious, and responsible. It tells you to wait until you are more prepared, more confident, more certain. But courage recognizes that waiting for perfect conditions is often a form of avoidance. Action clarifies what fear distorts. Movement exposes truth that hesitation never will. Courage begins with honesty. You acknowledge what you are afraid of without allowing it to define you. Suppressed fear grows stronger, but confronted fear loses power. When you name your fear, you shrink its influence. Faith strengthens this process by reminding you that fear does not have authority over your calling. You were never promised comfort, but you were promised presence. Acting despite fear requires trust in something greater than your emotions. Emotions fluctuate, but purpose remains. Courage anchors itself in conviction rather than confidence. You move forward not because you feel ready, but because you believe the step matters. Each courageous action builds evidence that fear is not fatal. Fear thrives on imagination. It projects worst-case scenarios and magnifies potential loss. Courage counters this by focusing on responsibility rather than outcome. You are not responsible for controlling results, but you are responsible for obedience and effort. When you shift your focus from outcome to action, fear loses its leverage. Courage is often misunderstood as boldness, but it is frequently quiet and uncelebrated. It looks like making the call you have been avoiding, starting the work when no one is watching, or speaking truth when silence feels safer. These moments may never receive applause, but they shape character and direction. Fear can keep you trapped in familiarity. Even when circumstances are limiting, familiarity feels safer than uncertainty. Courage challenges this comfort by asking what staying the same is costing you. Growth requires departure from what is known. Courage is choosing progress over comfort, even when comfort feels easier. Faith reframes courage as obedience rather than bravery. You act not to prove strength, but to honor purpose. This perspective removes pressure to appear fearless. You do not need to conquer fear to move forward. You need to trust God more than you trust your doubts. Courage becomes an expression of faith in motion. Each time you act despite fear, you expand your capacity. Fear does not disappear, but it becomes less controlling. You develop resilience and confidence rooted in experience rather than assumption. You learn that fear often exaggerates difficulty and underestimates your ability to adapt. Courage also influences others. When people see you move forward despite uncertainty, it gives them permission to do the same. Courage creates momentum that extends beyond individual action. It becomes a catalyst for collective growth and shared belief. Fear will always attempt to negotiate delay. It will promise safety in exchange for stagnation. Courage rejects that bargain. It understands that avoiding risk may protect comfort, but it also limits potential. Acting despite fear is not reckless. It is intentional movement aligned with purpose, driven by faith, and strengthened through action that reshapes identity and expands possibility. Alignment with God's vision begins with surrender, not strategy. It requires releasing the need to control outcomes and embracing the responsibility to obey direction. Many people ask God to bless their plans without first asking if those plans reflect His purpose. Alignment is not about adding faith to ambition. It is about allowing faith to shape ambition. When your vision aligns with God's, progress carries peace, even when the path is challenging. God's vision often unfolds gradually. It rarely arrives as a complete blueprint because growth requires dependence. Alignment means being willing to take the next step without seeing the entire journey. Trust becomes the foundation. You learn to listen more than you speak, to discern rather than demand. This posture creates sensitivity to guidance that cannot be forced or rushed. Misalignment creates frustration. You may experience movement, but not fulfillment. Activity without alignment leads to exhaustion because effort is being poured into directionless motion. Alignment restores clarity. It filters decisions and simplifies priorities. When your choices are guided by God's vision, you stop chasing every opportunity and start committing to the right ones. Alignment requires transformation before manifestation. God's vision is not just about what you will do, but who you must become to sustain it. Character development precedes visible success. Alignment shapes humility, patience, and integrity. It refines motives and strengthens discipline. You are prepared internally before being elevated externally. Faith plays a central role in alignment because God's vision often contradicts comfort. It may require waiting when you want to rush, releasing when you want to hold on, or stepping forward when fear suggests retreat. Alignment demands obedience even when understanding is incomplete. You trust that clarity will come through faithfulness, not control. Alignment with God's vision also requires discernment between good and God-ordained. Not every good opportunity is your assignment. Alignment teaches you to say no to distractions that dilute focus. You begin to value impact over appearance and purpose over popularity. This discernment protects you from burnout and misdirection. Alignment influences how you measure success. Instead of defining success by comparison or recognition, you define it by obedience and faithfulness. Progress is evaluated by alignment rather than applause. This shift brings stability in seasons of both affirmation and obscurity. You remain grounded because your identity is anchored in calling, not outcomes. God's vision often includes service beyond self. Alignment expands your perspective from personal achievement to collective purpose. You recognize that your gifts are not just for personal advancement, but for contribution. This understanding deepens fulfillment and adds meaning to effort. You work with intention because you know your impact extends beyond what you can see. Alignment does not eliminate challenges, but it provides assurance within them. When difficulties arise, you are less likely to question your direction because alignment has already settled the question of purpose. You endure with confidence, knowing that resistance does not negate calling. It often confirms it. Alignment is a continuous process, not a one-time decision. It requires daily renewal, regular reflection, and consistent humility. You remain open to correction and growth. You adjust without losing conviction. As you stay aligned, your actions, values, and direction begin to reflect God's vision with increasing clarity. creating a life that moves forward with purpose, faith, and unwavering intention.